The KUDZUKIAN Network presents Riffin' on Jazz with your host, Howard Robertson and Malvin Massey.
Sonny Rollins.
You got to improve, man. You got Coltrane and Ornette Coleman and these boys coming up. You better get your stuff together.
Mr. Miles Davis.
White people are funny. In America, they thought that I just woke up one morning and had the blues and started playing the trumpet. But it don't go like that, and you can't explain that to them.
Miles was able to make something that was wrong into something that was right.
Now they know. I'm not an accident.
Riffin' on Jazz.
Riffin' on Jazz. On Jazz. On Jazz. On Jazz.
Welcome back to Riffin' on Jazz. I'm Howard Robertson.
And I'm Malvin Massey.
And Riffin' on Jazz is your weekly visit with friends talking about the music that we love.
That classic African-American art form called jazz.
That's exactly right. Malvin Massey.
Howard Robertson. Hey, man, thanks for the trip to the game. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, man, we had fun, didn't we?
Yeah,
that was a hell of a game.
Yeah,
we should not talk about things that the audience doesn't know about.
Yeah.
We went to the University of Memphis UCLA game together and set up in the Nike box.
That was a lot of
like
fun.
big wigs, and saw a hellacious game that thankfully University of Memphis won. But we thank you for being back with us. We want to thank you for something else too. We want to thank you for the tremendous feedback that we've gotten, that you've given us, and the compliments and the kind words that you've given us on this show.
The great response for what we do. And, you know, this is something that came up because, well, it just was something that felt right to do, to talk about jazz the way we're talking about it now. There's plenty of shows that educate you. Austin Belmer out of Nashville with his jazz on the side, and Lisa Avery. There's a lot of shows that you know, but
they don't do it like this, Jack.
Yeah, just sitting around talking stuff and, you know, and this and that, and listening to some cool music, man.
And it feels good to us, and obviously it feels good to you. So we want to say thank you. And don't stop. Keep listening and keep the kind words coming. Yes. We have a tremendous show today, and we're going to talk about the quick change artists of jazz.
Okay, now you've got to explain that because, like Larry said, we didn't want to be morbid about this thing.
Right. These are artists that, and we call them quick change artists because that's exactly what they did. They literally quickly changed the really the musical landscape of jazz. And the reason they had to do it very, very quickly is because unfortunately they didn't live very long. They died very, very young, and but they influenced the genre, and they influenced most importantly other artists.
Yeah, so that they feel their music, their styles, the things that they were known for, they keep on going.
Exactly. And a
lot of these cats are people that people don't really hear a lot about.
Absolutely. They don't hear a whole lot about. Beginning with one that was tremendous, only lived to be 25 years old. 25 years old. Everybody was wondering if he's like this at 25, what's he going to be like when he really, really matures? And we are talking about none other than Clifford Brown.
There's always the fact that you, on a trumpet especially, that to cover the full range of the instrument is extremely difficult, and you have to practice sometimes a lot of lip slurs and staccatos and things of that sort from the bottom of the instrument, so to speak, all the way up to the top. And the trumpet now of today has such a wide range that in order to play from the bottom all the way up to the top is quite a feat. And it's something that we're all, Dizzy and myself, and we're all working on in the hopes of mastering it completely.
How many hours of practice did you put in when you first took up the horn before you knew that you were going to follow it as a career?
Well, I used to practice, say about 2 hours just about every day. The most important thing in my practicing, I think, was that I didn't miss any days. I would practice every day. Even if I had to cut the time short, I would practice every day.
Well, of course, today you get a chance to play on the stand every day, 3 or 4 hours, and that is a sort of practice in itself. But do you do additional practicing before you go on the job today?
Well, it's very important for trumpet players to warm up thoroughly before they start to play the night. And And I find that although you can be working every night consistently, that for a trumpet player alone, that's really not just enough to suffice. And of course, when you're not working, it's very essential that you practice, in order to keep up with the things that you develop when you are working and practicing.
That was a great Clifford Brown.
Yeah,
Clifford
nice
Brown.
An interview there.
Right. And to let people kind of know what Clifford Brown was to jazz, I got a little analogy. Would you like to hear it? Here it go. Clifford Brown was to jazz what Otis Redding was to R&B. And here's what I mean by that. He came in, and over a very, very brief amount of time, he influenced the heck out of it, and had produced a lot of music.
Yeah.
And then he died. Clifford Brown was 25 when he passed away in a car wreck, which we're going to talk about. And Otis Redding was 27 when he died in the plane crash, right?
Yeah. And Clifford Brown is another thing, too. When we talked about Billie Holiday and Charlie Parker and all these cats, which we're going to mention Parker again, but we always think of the tragedy of these musicians with the heroin and all.
Due to addiction.
Clifford Brown was never addicted to it. He was a clean living guy.
Clean living guy.
As a matter of fact, T. Monk said that he influenced him as far as his personal lifestyle.
Absolutely.
To learn that you could still be a jazz musician and don't have to be a junkie.
Clifford Brown was a major influence on the likes of Donald Byrd, Freddie Hubbard, and even Wynton Marsalis.
Yeah.
And I heard a great quote by Donald Byrd. Donald Byrd said Miles Davis was a stylist. Clifford Brown was a trumpet player.
Clifford had that great sound. Arturo Sandoval has done a great CD about him.
Absolutely.
Everybody does so much in honor of Clifford Brown because of that sweet sound that he had.
Right.
And he was one of the first hard bop trumpet players. Although he wasn't like Dizzy. It was a whole different kind of thing.
It was. And Dizzy was one of his major influences and closest friends. Clifford Brown was ironically involved in, I think, 1950 in a car crash.
Yeah, messed up his shoulder.
Messed him up. And it was in the hospital for a whole year. Dizzy Gillespie was a regular visitor who came to see him and encourage him and whatnot.
Yeah,
and
he played piano.
He was originally a piano player.
Yeah. Couldn't play the trumpet because of his shoulder.
Right. But Clifford Brown, you will hear, and you probably have heard his name as a big influence on a lot of artists. And
but the tune everybody loves from Clifford Brown, Joy Spring,
big round tones, beautiful trumpet playing. the genius of Clifford Brown.
I love that song.
Doesn't that sound good? Doesn't that sound good?
This is Malvin Massey, and you're listening to Riffin' on Jazz on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
We're riffing on jazz.
I'll play the blues for you.
Blues in the Basement with Stephanie and T-Shaw.
Some great festivals going on around the tri-state area.
Got your dancing shoes?
Man, as long as I'm with you, baby, I'm always be on my toes.
Drop that zero.
Bring your blues, boo.
I got him.
We'll see you.
Let me go home.
Get set for an all-new season of Blues in the Basement, coming soon to the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Rolling down the street with my radio on, listen to funky politics.
The mayor of the city of Memphis, Mayor Jim Strickland. How are you, sir?
Fantastic.
We keep it real, we keep it right, and we keep it funky.
Get set for an all-new season of funky politics, coming soon to the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Riffin' on Jazz.
I think I know a lot about jazz.
It's only what you've been doing the last 30-some years.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
A voice that can make you laugh and make you cry.
Good jazz, you don't have to worry about what they're talking about. But when they pick up those instruments, we all speak the same language. And don't you know you went in the kitchen and come back with a big bowl of salad?
Riffin' on Jazz on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Riffin', 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 riffin'. We're riffin' on jazz.
As I mentioned earlier, Clifford Brown unfortunately left us at the tender age of 25 in another car crash. But you've heard of Bud Powell, the famous Bud Powell. His brother Richie Powell was a bandmate of Clifford, and they were driving to Chicago from Wilmington, Delaware, I believe, and they were on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. Richie Powell's wife was driving, and
it was raining.
Yeah, it was raining, and said she lost control of the car, and all three were killed.
Yeah,
car ran off the road and all three were killed. He was 25. So, like I said, I mean, he made such an impact on music.
You still hear all these cats sounding like Clifford Brown,
absolutely,
and paying homage to him too.
Our first quick change artist.
Yeah.
Our second one is we started off this show playing a song by this guy, right?
Yeah.
The Sidewinder, which happened to be one of the first songs that we learned to play a long time ago, and that was by Lee Morgan.
Edward Lee Morgan. And he was only 33 at the time of his demise, and it was up in Slugs in Greenwich Village. But man, Lee Morgan, he was, we were listening to the tracks, anytime you listen to a track by this cat, you notice that he always had two sounds going together.
Horns playing in unison and play. Yeah,
he did that in that tune Totem Pole on that Sidewinder CD.
Right.
So they called it a totem pole because it was a change every time it stepped up. Tenor saxophone. He and Joe Henderson. I mean, this cat was fabulous, man. He was such a good trumpet player. He played with everybody. He was well known.
Everybody, right, and had great success.
Yeah.
And without further ado, let's listen to some Lee Morgan. And that was the great Lee Morgan.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of what happened to Lee Morgan, in 1972 at a Manhattan club called Slugs, which you know a little something about, right?
Slugs in Greenwich Village.
You been there?
Yeah. My uncle took us there when we were kids to see Rahsaan Roland Kirk. And actually, he was a cop, so they didn't say that about us drinking, and we weren't there.
You were sitting at the bar.
Sitting at the bar.
You how old?
I was 14.
You 14, sitting at the bar ordering drinks.
Yeah.
At Slugs.
But we got a chance to see Rahsaan Roland Kirk. I actually got to see him play two horns. I couldn't believe he could do it.
Absolutely. Well, what happened, as they say, what had happened to Lee was he had been battling a heroin addiction.
Yeah. And you know who was up there with him?
Who?
Phineas Newborn Jr.
That night?
Finest was up there that day. That night.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so one night in February of 1972, after battling a heroin addiction and whatnot, he had been playing a set, and his wife, one Helen Moore Morgan, his common law wife, shows up and upset about something, and as they say, accidentally shot him.
Yeah.
How do you accidentally shoot somebody? You show up with a gun. And so she what they really said was she accidentally killed him. So apparently she shot him without the intent to kill him. So maybe she shot him in the leg or something. And he ended up bleeding to death.
Yeah.
Waiting on an ambulance.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, Phineas told me one time he was talking to him when she came in there to talk to him. To talk to him.
So at the tender age of 33. And that's how he died. But
that trumpet, we'll never forget that trumpet. He and Joe Henderson were beside him, and the sounds that he always made with blending those horns together, blending those lead melodies together.
Right.
Man, he did it with xylophones, with vibes. He did it with saxophones. He did it with everybody. You always hear his trumpet in the lead.
Totally. And that really segues us to another fantastic guy that you might not be familiar with. His name was Hampton Barnett Halls Jr.
Yeah.
L.A. kid.
And we got to tell people about him.
Born and raised in L.A. and the author of a memoir that's got the coolest name I have ever heard, and unusual for that time. You would name something that now.
Yeah.
What was the name of it?
Raise Up Off Me.
Raise Up Off Me. Talking about Hampton Halls. Let's listen. That was Hampton Halls. And you know what, Malvin? I'm thrilled to introduce people to a cat like Hampton because he was prolific and he was tremendous. He was a tremendous piano player.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't even, but me, like I said last time, I think I know a lot. I didn't know who Hampton Halls was. Dick LaPalme hipped me to it. He said, "Why don't you ever play any Hampton Halls?" I said, "Who is that?" The next thing I know, I got a book in the mail called Raise Up Off of Me. When I started reading about it, I thought, wow, how did I miss out on this cat?
Huge influence on Andre Previn, Horace Silver, and Oscar Peterson.
Yeah, imagine that.
Ain't that something? Ain't that something? Hampton Halls was... he was complex.
He was a church kid.
He was a church kid, absolutely, and a very, very complex guy. As I said, raised in Los Angeles. At a very, very young age, he was playing with Dexter Gordon and Art Pepper and Shorty Rogers, Teddy Edwards, and
his partner Wardell Gray.
Wardell Gray, right, and playing in the Howard McGee Quintet, who at the Heidi Ho Club, which nobody would recognize, but they had a little sax player in there by the name of Charlie Parker. So that was one of his bandmates. But this is very, very interesting about the lead into the next song. So Hampton had a heroin addiction.
Yeah, it screwed him up in the Army when he was in the Army. In Korea.
Totally messed him up and got caught. And between his trial and his sentencing, he felt the need to get right. So he wrote and recorded a lot of gospel and spiritual type songs. And this next one is one of the ones that he penned during the time between his trial and his sentencing, and it's appropriately called The Sermon.
Hampton Halls. Fast fingers, smooth style. One of the guys that created bebop.
Absolutely,
basically.
a major influence, and a very interesting guy. And his fate was, so I mentioned that he had a heroin addiction. Did I mention he had one? I know I said that earlier.
Yeah,
he had one as well. He was the victim of a sting operation, and in 1958 he got caught. And as I mentioned, in between his trial and his sentencing,
that's when he wrote
that song. And he was convicted and sent to prison. After serving 3 years in 1961, I believe, he was watching television and he was watching John Fitzgerald Kennedy's inauguration. And it settled in his mind that Kennedy could pardon him with an executive pardon. And guess what? In 1963, before John Kennedy was killed, he was the 42nd of 43 executive clemency pardons that
Jack Kennedy.
Yeah, ain't that something?
That's true, man. I mean, it was because he asked him for one thing, but also Kennedy knew who he was.
Right.
He knew
the
piano player that he was.
Right.
Jack
Died at 48 from a brain hemorrhage. So Hampton Halls.
Too young,
way too young. But coming up, we got something that was amazing to me because I never knew this thing existed.
Yeah, Yardbird and Paul Desmond.
We got an interview we got the track of Paul Desmond, a tremendous alto player, interviewing who?
Yardbird. Yeah, I bet you're not gonna say what you said. I bet you're not going to say what you said before.
I said they were two alto sax playing some. Yeah. And if you wonder what I'm saying, just reflect back on what Trump just said. Not long ago. They were some playing boys.
Yeah.
Let's check them out.
It's so hard to describe music other than the basic way to describe it. Music is basically melody, harmony, and rhythm. But I mean, people can do much more with music than that. It can be very descriptive in all kinds of ways, all walks of life. Don't you agree, Paul?
Yeah, and you always do have a story to tell. It's one of the most impressive things about everything I've ever heard of yours.
Well, that's more or less the object. That's the way I thought it should be.
Another thing that's been a major factor in your playing is this fantastic technique that nobody's quite equaled. And I always wondered about that too, whether that came behind practicing, or whether that was just from playing, whether it evolved gradually.
Well, you make it so hard for me to answer, because I can't see where there's anything fantastic about it at all. I put quite a bit of study into the horn, that's true. In fact, the neighbors threatened to ask my mother to move once when I was living out west. I mean, they said I was driving them crazy with the horn. I used to put in at least from 11 to 15 hours a day.
Yeah, that's what I wondered.
Well, that's true, yes. I did that for over a period of 3 or 4 years.
Oh.
Yeah.
I guess that's the answer.
Well, that's the facts anyway.
So just in case you guys have some context, here's what you need to understand. You need to understand that both Malvin and I played the same instrument. We began on alto sax, the instrument that Paul Desmond and Charlie Parker both played. And as kids coming up learning to play, we looked up to them both for different reasons.
Desmond was that soft, smooth, mellow, easy jazz tone.
Absolutely.
And Parker was that exciting bebop, swing, speed
and dexterity. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. So that was the significance to us as young musicians coming up. Charlie Parker, born in Kansas City, also known as Yardbird. And for you young people who might not understand what a Yardbird is, tell them what a Yardbird was.
It was a chicken.
It's a chicken.
Chicken they hit on the road. Parker told him to stop the car. He ran out and grabbed that Yardbird and took it on got the lady to cook it when they got to the people's house where they was staying.
There probably was not a more influential character in jazz than Charlie Parker. Would you say?
And nobody more tragic.
Absolutely. So we're gonna get into some Charlie Parker right here. We'll be back.
This is Malvin Massey, and you're listening to Riffin' on Jazz on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
We're riffing on jazz.
Rolling down the street with my radio on, listen to Funky Politics.
The mayor of the city of Memphis, Mayor Jim Strickland. How are you, sir?
Fantastic.
We keep it real, we keep it right, and we keep it funky.
Get set for an all-new season of Funky Politics. Coming soon to the KUDZUKIAN Network.
DC, of that Funky Politics fame, we got a brand new show. It's called The Best in Blue. We'll cover your Memphis Police Department and how they work to keep us safe day and night. Best in Blue on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
R&R on sports, artivism, Best in Blue, Funky Politics, Blues in the Basement, Neighborhood Connect, Riffin' on Jazz on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Riffin', 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 riffin'. We're riffin' on jazz.
Welcome back to Riffin' on Jazz with Howard Robertson and Malvin Massey. Before the break, Malvin, that was one of the most prominent and,
Yeah, he was one of the most influential saxophone players ever
of all time.
That track, by the way, Laura, was from a 1945 movie. It was Gene Tierney and Dana Andrews. Laura was the movie. It was written by David Raskin with lyrics by Johnny Mercer.
Right.
It was recorded by an awful lot of people, but one of the most that version by Charlie Parker was probably one of the most popular ever.
Charlie Parker a lot of people know that he became addicted to heroin as well. But, and this is personal for me because I had a friend that actually literally got shot on April 5th, the day after King got shot, April 5th, 1968 in Memphis by an irate store owner. And he had the same fate, but Charlie Parker developed a morphine addiction after being hospitalized after an accident, an automobile accident.
Yeah.
And that's how he became addicted to heroin.
Yeah.
And I had a friend that had that same thing.
It's a terrible thing, too, that happened to him like that. He couldn't get away from the scare. He couldn't get away from it. And it destroyed him.
Right,
it pretty much destroyed him.
Couldn't get out of his own way.
But you could never hear it in his horn. You know, and that was one of the things, too, about him. You could never hear it in his horn.
No, you could never hear it in his playing, although everybody that worked with him and was around him know that he missed a bunch of gigs.
Oh, they took his card
They took his card, and he was totally unreliable. Yeah. But you never heard it in his music.
No.
Never heard it in his music.
And still to this day, cats are trying to play like Charlie Parker.
Right. Speaking of playing like Charlie Parker, don't we have somebody else coming up?
Our Memphis connection.
From Memphis, Tennessee?
Yeah.
That always got confused with Charlie Parker.
Yeah, is that Charlie Parker? No, that's Sonny Chris. And that was William Sonny Chris, born in Memphis, Tennessee.
lived here till he was 15.
15, yeah, and then moved to Los Angeles.
Moved to L.A. And now you mentioned that people always got him mixed up with Charlie Parker.
When you listen to the two of them playing, you listen to him playing, and that was the first thing you thought, wow, he's going fast. That's
right,
Parker, man.
Right. And there's a reason for that. Both of them played in Howard McGee's quintet. Now,
we just mentioned two cats.
Absolutely. Hampton Hawes, Charlie Parker, and Sonny Chris all played in the same band.
Out of Memphis, Tennessee.
All played in the same band. And Sonny Chris had it. His untimely demise came from a bout with illness with a lot of pain, and at the tender age of 50.
Yeah, but and the thing
he
about
shot
it,
himself.
He was on his way to Japan. They had booked him a tour to Japan.
Right.
And he was getting ready to go there, but they couldn't stand the pain.
And he shot himself. So again, a quick change artist changed the landscape of jazz music.
Yeah,
and left too
we don't
soon,
hear about
died
him
too soon.
with Diz and Charlie, but Sonny Chris was right there in the middle of creating the bebop,
totally
the up-tempo bebop.
And let's talk about another. Speaking of a creator, arguably the creator of modern jazz fusion bass as we know it. Bass had been an instrument in the background and certainly not a solo instrument.
Didn't take the lead melody or anything like that.
Until there was a young guy named Jaco Pastorius. Here's an interview.
So you were writing back when you were still playing with
I was
brass?
writing before I ever played the bass. I was always writing music, even if it was just 8 notes of a melody. I always had, I would keep it in my head,
Now, would this be something you'd sing yourself or pick out on a piano, or how would you?
However it came, I don't know. But, every way. You could be on the bass, you could just hear a melody in your head, you play something on the piano, I don't restrict myself to any instruments or any formulas. It's always different, man. I can play different types of music.
Francis Anthony Jaco Pastorius III.
What a name! Yeah. But a phenomenal bass player, and like we said, absolutely a quick change artist.
Yeah.
In terms of changing the landscape of bass.
You mentioned it earlier. Bass players up until his time were always in the background. They were the rhythm section.
In the background.
He put them in the front, which was what Brian Bromberg does now.
Totally.
Another one of those cats.
And he was the precursor and the pioneer for a lot of the great jazz basses that you hear today. He did a thing like harmonics, which is basically playing chords on the bass, and he did so many things that was lightning fast. Stacking
the music with the electronics. He was the first one to get into doing that
Absolutely. Tremendous character in jazz. And we're going to hear some of his work coming up. This is called The Chicken.
We're ripping on jazz.
Jaco Pastorius was such an influence. I mean, influence is just not a strong enough word to say what he did for bass playing and what he did for jazz fusion, because he played with Weather Report, and Weather Report was the quintessential jazz fusion band.
Yeah, with Joe Zawinul, who came from Cannonball.
Absolutely.
You know, all of these guys were such skillful masters of their instruments.
So Stanley Clarke, Marcus Miller, Victor Wooten, and Earth, Wind and Fire's Verdine White. There's some Jaco Pastorius in all of them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, died too young. What, 35?
35, yeah. He had this complex. He let people beat him up. He'd start fights.
He would pick
and get
on.
beat up.
He would start stuff. And club bouncer, that was a third or fourth degree black belt. He went in and messed with, and the dude beat him up and basically.
They left him laying too. They didn't put him in the hospital and he died.
But that was the unfortunate demise of Jaco Pastorius.
But there's my partner Mike Herzon down there in Fort Lauderdale says they've got a park dedicated to Jaco Pastorius, not too far from where that all happened.
Fantastic. And we're going to get out of here. We're going to thank you for being with us again. We've been riffing on jazz, and we're going to get out of here with the song that Jaco Pastorius made. Yeah. It is called
Birdland. And you mentioned it too. He starts it off. Everybody thinks that's a guitar. That's Jaco.
That's a bass.
On the bass.
Get back with us. Thank you.
Riffin' on Jazz. Executive produced by KUDZUKIAN. Co-host by Howard Robertson and Malvin Massey Jr. Music curation by Howard and Malvin. And recorded at KUDZUKIAN Studios. Riffin' on Jazz. Part of the KUDZUKIAN Network.